Huh? Are you serious? What the hell? Okay, boys, we have ourselves a topic here today. The Vancouver Canucks had themselves a few interesting signings during this offseason. We've all kinda, talked about the names that have been discussed here and there. Vancouver signed themselves some Boston guys. They had signed themselves some Edmonton guys. And now, heading into this upcoming year, the team looks as deep as they have ever looked. You can say they look better than they did at this point in last year's offseason. It's all good at Applewood, right? I think a lot of Vancouver Canucks fans are fairly optimistic heading into this upcoming year. But 7 hours ago, you had Thomas Drance on The Athletic publish this article, Vancouver Canucks Summer Notebook, Rick Tocchet's Canada Gig, and Vincent Desharnais' opportunity. There also is more talked about in this piece, as you can tell from the headline, and I'll leave a link in the description if you want to go ahead and read this article yourself. The Athletic, however, is paid for material, so we're not going to go out there and look at this directly. Instead, we're going to go over to ProHockeyRumors.com because what they went out there and did was publish an article that goes over some of the points that Drance makes in this Athletic piece. So I'll leave a link in the description to the Athletic article as well as West Notes, Desharnais, Rossi, and Rekoff. Because when it comes to the Vancouver Canucks and defenseman Vinny Desharnais, there might just be a very big opportunity here that we as fans may not have seen. The Vancouver Canucks, according to the Pro Hockey Rumors article, may slot in UFA signing Vinny Desharnais on their top defense pairing alongside of Quinn Hughes in spot duty next season, opines Thomas Drance of The Athletic. Doing so would allow Filip Hronek, who had spent all of last season stapled to Hughes and is fresh off signing an 8-year, $58 million deal, to drive his own pairing against easier competition. That's something head coach Rick Tocchet said he would consider doing, telling Drance that Hronek can tend to defer too much at times when playing with Hughes, and that he'd like to see Hronek be more forceful with his decisions. It would be a big jump for Desharnais, though. The 28-year-old only established himself as a full-time NHLer last season with the Oilers. He was a bottom-pairing presence for Edmonton, averaging $15.44 per game through 78 contests. He did post 11 points and a +3 rating with average possession metrics, but playing alongside a Hughes with any consistency would be a tough task for a player who's seen most of his professional career unfold with the AHL to date. Desharnais inked a 2-year, $4 million contract with Vancouver when free agency opened on July 1st. And that is very bold. Thomas Drance, I'll applaud you again once more for the scoops over here. Of course, Drance is not saying this is going to happen. It's just something that I think he's bringing up and he thinks is worth thinking about, because if it is a possibility here, then I think Canucks fans do have much to discuss. Now, let's go out there and talk about the better of the two players first. Because when it comes to Filip Hronek, a lot of Canucks fans will say that for the first half of the 23-24 season, he was absolutely fantastic. Just a phenomenal defenseman. He was on pace for 70 points or whatever it was. He was one of the top defensemen in NHL points alongside of Hughes. Of course, Hughes was number 1 the entire year, but Hronek was right up in there in the top 5. This was a really big deal for Canucks fans because not only was Hughes doing his thing, but Phil Hronek was allowing Hughes to exhibit more of that offensive touch because they played so well together. Hronek had 48 points in 81 games played, 5 goals, 43 assists. He only had 2 points in 13 games in the playoffs. Of course, the playoffs took place in the second half of the year, where Hronek was just not as offensively productive than the first half. Rick Tocchet going out there and calling Hronek out specifically, saying that he relies on Hughes too much or that he doesn't really have the opportunity to drive his own pair, is totally fair. And if you were to say, hey, Hronek, you are a $7 million defenseman on this team now, you are going to be making a lot of money, you're just under Hughes, AAV-wise, we can't be stacking it up with Hughes and you the entire time. Sure, the defensive strategy of having Hughes-Hronek as the one offensively leaning pair, and then all the other big guys in the 3, 4, 5, and 6 spots in the rest of the lineup, that worked for Vancouver in the first round against Nashville. It couldn't get them over Edmonton, though, and heading into next season, it seems like the idea of putting your best 2 offensive defensemen on separate pairings might come to fruition here. And if you have Filip Hronek driving his own pairing against weaker competition on the second pair, it could open the door to maybe some more commanding play out of him. He doesn't have to rely on Quinn Hughes to do a lot of the heavy lifting offensively, because his pairing partner could very well be Carson Soucy, who doesn't move the puck as well, who doesn't skate as well, and who isn't as good of an offensive defenseman. Now, Soucy can still score points. We had seen his sniping ability on display for parts of 2023-2024. That's possible out of him. But for Hronek to be paired alongside of him, maybe that bolsters up some of Soucy's numbers too, who really knows? Either way, this idea of splitting up Hughes and Hronek with the intention of getting Hronek to drive his own pairing is something that I hadn't even considered as a fan trying to build up this team and project the lines into next season, but it is an idea that I like. However, the guy coming up and playing first pairing minutes with Quinn Hughes, that kind of goes out there and tickles my spidey sense a little bit. Vinny Desharnais was a third-pairing defenseman for most of the season with Edmonton. He had played with Brett Kulak and a few other guys swapping around there. There were games that he didn't even play. Vinny Desharnais this previous season only had 78 games played in the regular season and 16 games played in the playoffs, so he did miss a good chunk of playoff action with Edmonton. 78 games played, though, of course, he did play the majority of the season with the Oilers. But when it comes to Vinny Desharnais, this is a guy whom, when I think about his profile, I do not think top 2 defenseman. The philosophy here, it kind of makes sense if you wanted to say, oh yeah, Quinn Hughes played so well with Luke Schenn in 20 whatever it was before Schenn left for Tampa, and then inevitably when he came back later on. Quinn Hughes was making great use out of a guy who isn't really the best skater in Luke Schenn, who's a lot more physical in Luke Schenn, and who doesn't produce too many points in Luke Schenn. Now, to Schenn's credit, he did produce a lot towards the end of his Vancouver tenure, which is why he was traded to Toronto with such a high price. But Hughes and Schenn worked out very well. I will say, though, that part of the reason I feel Quinn Hughes' production exploded in this previous season was because he was playing with a much more offensively capable guy in Hronek, but Hughes playing with Schenn was still very effective, and if you wanted to bring that philosophy into next season, say, okay, have Vinny Desharnais as the shutdown force, the defensively minded physical guy to play with Hughes. Sure, it takes away some of what Hughes is allowed to do offensively, but it gives him a little bit more security when you consider that Filip Hronek isn't really the most offensively minded guy in his own right. So, I don't know, there's a pros and cons to this idea, but at the same time, you have to start questioning, is Vinny Desharnais, of all people, capable of playing top 2 minutes? I mean, the article says it right here. He was a 15-minute defenseman at Edmonton this previous season. He was playing on the third pairing, going from playing with Brett Kulak to Quinn Hughes with almost double the ice time. Seems like a recipe for disaster if you're an Oilers fan looking in on what Vancouver is trying to do. But honestly, the idea is crazy enough, in my opinion, that it might just work. I don't know, man. This actually seems like a really interesting idea that is worth exploring and worth talking about, which is why I want to leave a link in the description of both of these articles that we had looked at, the Thomas Drance Athletic piece as well as the Pro Hockey Rumors piece summarizing it all. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the idea of Vinny Desharnais being a number 2 defenseman on the Vancouver Canucks and Filip Hronek moving down to play with Soucy on the second pairing? Do you think this makes sense? Do you think Hronek's production will improve because of this? Do you think Quinn Hughes' production will improve because of this? What are your thoughts on Vinny Desharnais playing in that kind of a spot? Thomas Drance had the idea. We're just talking about it here on the YouTube channel. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.